Okay, so here we are in section 12.4, testing the significance of the correlation. So let's kind of review very quickly uh, what we've covered up until now. So we're going to be looking at an overview of linear regression and correlation analysis. So the first thing you want to do is you want to prepare your data. And what we covered in section 12.2 was identifying the independent and the dependent variables. Now, one thing we haven't covered yet, which is 7.12.6, section 12.6 is where you want to identify outliers, report them, and possibly remove them before you move on. Okay, but I'm I'm saving that process until the end because there's enough to keep track of already without maybe adding this extra step at the beginning. So right now, the data sets that I'm using are, they don't have these outliers. Okay, but just be aware that looking for outliers and removing them would be something that you would potentially do before you continue on with your analysis. Okay, and then next, you would progressively answer the following questions. So question number one is what we learned in section 12.2. And that is, does there appear to be a linear trend between X and Y, or your two random variables? Use technology to calculate this mean point, X bar, Y bar, and then be able to sketch a scatter plot of the data. So what you're trying to do is you're just trying to get a qualitative assessment just by looking at the pattern of points in your scatter plot to see if there is a linear pattern to them at all. That's question one. And to help you sketch your scatter plot, you use X bar and Y bar. I guess I could just kind of, draw that really quick. So, if you had a scatter plot and you've got your X and your Y variable, and, these were your data points, okay, you're just looking to see if there appears to be a linear trend. And it looks like you have a linear trend going this way. And when you calculate X bar, Y bar, X bar, Y bar will be a point that is on this linear trend. So calculating this first is actually helpful in order to help you sketch maybe where that linear trend is going to be positioned relative to your data. All right, so that's question one. Question two now, and that was in the next section, 12.3. Do you consider the line of regression to be a strong, moderate, or weak estimator of the sample data? So you use technology to actually get the line of regression equation, which looks like this, where M is the slope of the line, and B is the y-intercept. So M is the slope of the line, and B is where the line would cross the y-axis. That's your y-intercept. All right, and from this process of using technology to get this line of regression, you'll also end up getting the correlation coefficient. And this correlation coefficient, if you remember, you look up on a table where you've got correlation coefficient with a range of values, something kind of like this. I'm really oversimplifying this right now. But basically, if your correlation coefficient follows within any of these ranges, you would say maybe the correlation coefficient is weak, or moderate, or strong, or very strong. Okay. So again, so much that the technology is doing a lot of the work for you, and it is important for you to learn maybe how to just freehand sketch these things in order to communicate your ideas quickly to others. Um, and so all you're kind of doing is doing a little bit of algebra, um, but learning a little bit about this correlation coefficient, what it means as far as whether the points are tightly bound to the line of regression like this, or if they're more loosely positioned around the line of regression like that. Okay, and how that's related to the correlation coefficient. So this is what we've covered so far. Okay. Now we're going to do in section 12.4 is we're going to answer a couple of new questions. Okay, and these are the last two. So question 3 is, does the line of regression estimate the sample data with at least a 95% confidence level? So in other words, can this line of regression be used to make predictions? Okay. We'll be doing predictions in 12.5, but this question sets us up for doing a prediction. Okay. So what? We've got it. Is it something that's good enough quality that it can be used? Question 4 is, does the sample line of regression model the population line of regression with a 95% confidence level? So in other words, is the slope of the line of regression significantly different from 0? So remember that if you had two random variables, x and y, and let's say their scatter plot looked something like this, and then you calculate a line of regression that looks like a horizontal line or close to a horizontal line. Okay, this horizontal line actually has a slope of 0 or close to it. Okay, approximately 0. And so what this is showing is that no matter what value of x you've got, the value of y doesn't change, right? So, that shows that there's no correlation between, these two variables. Um, yeah, I was trying to think of an example here, but I think I'll just kind of leave it at that. Um, okay. So that's kind of all 4 questions. And in this section, we're going to be looking at these last 2. And so what I'll do first is I'll talk about what's involved for answering question 3. And then I'll talk about what's involved in answering question 4. And then we'll do some examples, kind of incorporating those in, okay, doing the actual calculations. Okay. I think this is a good point to stop here. Let me know if you have any questions.